Not a problem. I've been doing this a long time, so I'm in all kinds of uncomfortable.
Enter an audio-visual experience like no other.
Underground rap at its realest.
The insurance company has an amazing tolerance for your pain. I'm not a corporate guy.
Yeah.
I'm more independent. Now I are one. So then I got my license as both a public insurance adjuster and an independent adjuster.
Okay.
But if you're only 25 years old, you can't have 45 years of experience.
Right.
Helping you shorten your dang learning curve.
I've got the most interesting job in the world. I'm an insurance adjuster.
His legend precedes him, the way lightning precedes thunder. He is the most interesting man in the world.
I've been licensed since 1980 as a public adjuster and as an independent adjuster. I mean, I was State Farm up in Alaska.
Home of the DioJo Nation.
I call them the way I see them, John.
Yeah.
To me, if you're dealing with property, you know, it's not rocket science. It's not rocket science. It's not rocket science.
Should
it's
be
not
pretty
nuclear
apparent,
physics.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just can you do it?
Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
This kind of segues into appraisal.
Thank you for coordinating the shirts, by the way.
There you go.
First episode of the DioJo Podcast 2020, the podcast that has been said by astute observers to be annoying but helpful.
That's just stupid.
It's been, I guess, an unspoken goal, and we've been really, I think, achieving that goal. But the topic today is appraisal. We've had some contractors reach out asking about the purpose, role, pros and cons of appraisal. So from our neck of the woods, the main character in this discussion is one Roger Housen. If you're in the Pacific Northwest, that's a name you should know. Excited to announce our sponsors, Restoration Industry Association, aka the RIA. Great opportunity to join your fellow intentional restorers at the RIA 2022 International Restoration Convention and Industry Expo, April 11th through 13th at the Peppermill Casino in Reno, Nevada. Let them know the DioJo sent you. And Office Services by Brandy provides unparalleled personalized bookkeeping services to a broad range of clients in many states. She has 15 years of experience in office management, accounting, administrative roles in the property restoration and construction industry, and will help you tackle the never-ending list to be done in the restoration industry by handling the R&M billings, collections, and many other key areas to take the burden off of you, the owner. She will help your business be a success. I will likely be releasing a longer form talking to him about some of the history of claims in general, his history in the industry. But their website is icdrinc.com. And there's resources on there. You probably can't see that very well. This is the unfair claims settlement practices, the appraisal process and overview. And so I would strongly encourage, if you happen to be an homeowner, policyholder, business owner, and you've come across this looking about appraisal, that's a great resource. Obviously, the majority of our audience is contractors and those involved in the claims world. And so this too as well, especially in the state of Washington, would be a good resource for you. And you'll see he is a wealth of knowledge. He calls them like he sees them.
I call them the way I see them.
Advocates for a very fair process. And so to round out this discussion, we've got some input from Ben Justison at Just Right Cleaning and construction in Moses Lake, Washington, my hometown. What's up, homies? We've got input from our good friend David Princeton, Advocate Claim Service, and he's got a new column in Michelle Blevin's newly owned and acquired Hostile Takeover CNR magazine. I'm scared.
Why?
Is the DioJo next? We've got our friend Bill Wilson, who wrote When Worlds Collide. We've got Andy McCabe talking about a hairy situation that he got himself into that intersects with this discussion. And then Sean Scott, him and I recently wrote articles, you might say complimentary articles in CNR Magazine on fire chasing that you might find as a good resource. And so that was, he serves now, was a contractor and now serves more, he said, more in the appraisal umpire role. And so he brings some perspective of that too. So trying to bring a more rounded, full discussion on the topic so it may be a little bit eclectic. Biggest purchase I ever made to date, other than my laptop, was a Hero 9 GoPro. And I recorded this conversation with Roger late Q3, Q4 last year on the GoPro, while also recording simultaneously on my iPhone for the voice recorder, just in case I screwed it up.
That's just stupid.
And no shock to many of you, I screwed it up. So the video, you might notice spots where there is no video, or the spot where the video doesn't quite line up. That's because maybe we backfilled with some video that doesn't sync up with the audio. But you may enjoy this one more primarily on audio because of the video issues, or you may just enjoy seeing the train wreck happen for yourself. Let's get to it.
What would you say you do here?
The Diojo Podcast.
This kind of segues into appraisal. Nobody wants to go to appraisal, John. Appraisal only deals with loss damage evaluation, not coverage.
Yeah.
So, but a lot of adjusters, because, and again, if you're only 25 years old, you can't have 45 years of experience.
Right. Yeah.
It's just mathematically not possible.
I saw the YouTube videos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the truth is that when I started claims, I had zero experience, and I was suddenly at now I are one. Now I are one.
Yeah.
Suddenly I'm, okay, I'm the guy that knows everything. I mean, I was State Farm up in Alaska. I was a newbie, and I gained experience, and quite frankly, John, things change so fast.
So you've been for 20 years. You've been on your own, right?
Yeah, well, actually longer than that. Dog years in this, 7 years is 1 year.
Yeah,
1 year is 7 years.
Okay.
But yeah, I've been.
Well, as your own
as
ICDR,
yeah,
claims dispute
resolution. 2000, I was being called upon to resolve disputes, and part of it is I'm kind of the devil everybody knows.
Okay.
And also, John, I look
You're
for
Satan
a reasonable
incarnate?
resolution. Pardon me?
You're Satan incarnate.
Yeah, I'm Satan incarnate.
Yes, Satan? Oh, I'm sorry, sir. You sounded like someone else. Never.
I've got an adjuster DNA.
Sure.
Now I are one. But the tie always goes to the policyholder. And I mean, that's the law.
Yeah.
The tie goes to the policyholder.
Well, do you, especially from your unique vantage point, even when I got in 2002, there was a lot more relationship driven, right? Adjusters had a lot more authority. It was a lot more common that an adjuster went to maybe 70-80% of the claims, right?
Right.
An in-house adjuster from the company that you bought your policy from, right?
Right.
A representative of the company. So, and you still had your outliers, but the nature of adjusting is not so much to minimize, but to ensure that it's thorough and accurate.
Well, and that's the way I was trained.
Yeah.
To State Farm's credit, my mentor, my boss, said, your job
is to pay for what we owe. Yeah.
No more, but no less.
Right.
I don't want you. You don't get any kudos from me for saying, "Hey, guess what? I held the claim down to less than what it should be."
Yeah.
So yes, I was trained, and not only that, John, but to look for coverage.
Sure.
Our job is to solve our policyholders' problem.
Right.
And ideally to have the policyholder happy and satisfied.
Yeah.
Having
Retention,
dealt with people
right?
for 45
Yeah.
years. I quote Snoopy from Charlie Brown, who said, I love humanity, it's the people I can't stand.
Nice hat.
It Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we bring Ben Justison from Just Right Cleaning and Construction to the stand.
Okay.
Have you had a claim yet go to appraisal or use the appraisal process?
No, we were thinking about it with one of our customers. It's pretty much up to them whether they do it or not.
Right.
It is time consuming.
Nobody wants to go to appraisal, John.
But I also spoke to a public adjuster out of the Seattle market. Typically, they don't do appraisals unless it's like you got to be like 40, 50K or more difference.
Okay.
If you've got like 10,000, 20,000, maybe. He says that's not really what we do. He says you can certainly do the appraisal process. It is time consuming as long as you have both sides have their person that is somewhat knowledgeable about the industry. Then both sides have to agree to an umpire, which is essentially just another appraiser that both parties agree to.
Yeah.
The biggest thing was it costs money, and it costs both sides their own cost of who they use.
Yeah.
It is time consuming. It can drag it out a few extra months, and it costs both sides. And if you're only apart maybe 10 grand, it's probably going to cost you at least that much to get the appraisal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here I'm going to defend the industry in that. So when asbestos became a thing,
Will you vultures please give us some privacy? He just died last night. It was the asbestos in here, that's what did it.
and when it first became a thing, suddenly it was $150,000
Yeah.
to abate the asbestos, and testing was $2,500.
Yeah.
And that went on for a long time. I mean, huge bills to, oh yes, this is asbestos, it's really dangerous. And
Yeah.
one of the adjusters I worked with from the University of Washington and got certified, I'm using air quotes that you can't
Yeah.
see on the podcast, certified in asbestos abatement. And then the companies figured out that it was a $35 lab fee. That they were getting charged $2,500.
Sure.
Well, yeah, but we're handling hazardous materials, and
Yeah.
they said, well, our adjusters we'll just send them out, and
Yeah.
they die. Oh well.
It was the asbestos in here, that's what did it.
We were just kind of cannon fodder, and nobody paid any attention to that. I want to be fair to the carriers.
Yeah.
That. I quote, I don't know if you know who Willie Sutton is. He was a famous bank robber from the 1920s.
Oh.
And some reporter asked him, Mr. Sutton, why do you rob banks? And he said, well, you fool, that's where the money is. And so insurance fraud is a huge industry.
Yeah.
But then the other thing is, and here's, I'm going to say the good news and the bad news about now that the adjusters are answering the metrics, so they no longer make any decisions. There's so many layers of decision making above them,
Yeah.
John, that frankly you're just dealing with, and I'm not insulting adjusters when I call them a dumb terminal, because they don't, everything gets interrupted. Don't assume that the adjuster you're dealing with knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
They haven't got a clue.
Yeah.
Many times.
Sometimes having some grace is good. Yeah.
It is. I mean, be aware of that. Because,
Yeah.
and the thing that a lot of people will, in fact, I find the less you know, the more self-assured you sound. Because they're scared people will go, well, yeah, that's the way it is. And they don't want to argue with you. So they shut you down because they know that they can't hold up their end of the argument. And so I've been shut down more by people that don't know what they're talking about than people that do know what they're talking about and say, okay, well, I'll engage it because I know, I know what the hell I'm doing.
Yeah.
So be aware of that. I mean, don't assume that the person you're dealing with knows what they're doing.
Deal as much as you can with facts and don't always go guns blazing, at every provocation.
And never actually, I always learned, whatever you put in print, whether it's an email, a text, or whatever, imagine it being blown up full size in front of a jury. One thing judges hate is they don't love lawyers. What they really hate are people who aren't lawyers trying to write lawyerly. So do not quote law.
We mentioned several books and the CNR magazine. We've already mentioned CNR magazine. That is a free publication, Cleaning and Restoration Magazine. We will be mentioning the Assignment of Benefits book by Ed Cross, the restoration lawyer. That's available directly from him. We're also going to be referencing When Worlds Collide by Bill Wilson.
Get a copy, your own copy of When Worlds Collide by Bill Wilson.
This is Resolving Insurance Coverage and Claims Disputes. Just a real good book on negotiating and coming to a reasonable agreement with people in general. Since we're on the topic of books, my latest book, So You Want to Be a Project Manager by John Isaacson, The Intentional Restorer, this is available on Amazon, and you can actually pairs really well with Be Intentional Estimating and Be Intentional Culture, which actually some of the David Princeton and Andy McCabe that are on this podcast were also contributors to this book. And these reference Ed Cross and many of our other guests. But this is just a trifecta of books for you, for your technicians, as you're branching into restoration. Most of these are about mindset and habits. And I would say the other resources previously mentioned are great for that as well. So just a soft plug.
Christmas is upon you and you still haven't found that perfect gift for that special someone on your Christmas list? You need John Isaacson's new book, So You Want to Be a Project Manager. Forget about chocolates and perfume and jewelry. The person who said that diamonds are a girl's best friend didn't read John Isaacson's new book. It's everything you want in a gift. It has a cover, it has pages, it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Show her you really love her with John Isaacson's new book, So You Want to Be a Project Manager.
You can order a signed copy directly from us, or you can get these on Amazon.
Don't assume that the adjuster you're dealing with knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
They haven't got a clue.
Yeah.
Many times.
Sometimes having some grace is good. Yeah.
I had one where it was an appraisal, and the other appraiser said, "Well, we don't pay sales tax on labor."
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, the governor gets pretty cranky
up
here when you don't pay it, because they charge for it."
Yeah.
And he goes, "Well, that's just stupid."
Yeah.
And I go, "I don't care if it's stupid.
It's
that's
the law."
The law.
Yeah.
Well, I'll have an adjuster out of Arizona who doesn't understand the fact that it rains a lot up here.
Yeah.
So after you've had a loss and you temp it, and in fact, one of my favorite appraisals that it came up was a loss where it was a bad fire loss, but the temp was going to cost, because it was a mansion, it was going to cost $10,000. And the young adjuster out of Arizona said, that's why I'm not picking on Arizona, it just happens I remember it, and she said, well, there's no way we're going to pay $10,000 to temp a place. That's just ridiculous. And of course, it's Pacific Northwest, and the insurance said, well, I'm not going to spend $10,000 to temp it. If they say, that they're not going to temp it, that's on them.
Let it leak.
Well, long story short, because it was such a battle over what was going to get paid, the house got trashed because you didn't temp it.
Yeah.
So you had rain coming in, you had the elements coming in, and damned if the thing just wasn't a total loss.
Yeah.
Well, then the insurance company is arguing, well, you didn't protect against further damage. And they said, no, we said we were going to. You said you weren't going to pay for it.
Yeah.
And that's part of our claim.
Yeah.
And the thing that saved us was the adjuster said, besides that, it looks like a total loss. Which was just, that it's always be careful what you
screenshot, email,
Well, and we didn't know about it until a year later, where we're in the appraisal, and then the adjuster said it looks like a total loss at the time of loss.
Anyways,
so
would you say, in framing that, right? There's plenty of bad actors in insurance. We all have had that client that's a bad actor, right? Opportunist, and then there's plenty of bad contractors that are bad actors. Right. So, a good friend of our show, I don't know if you know him, Pete Consigli. He's called the Restoration Watchdog.
Keep coming.
4M's on moisture.
We ain't done yet.
4M's materials.
Peak and Shigley Global Watchdog.
4M's mold.
AMO winter break. Back to normal with a question mark.
Keep coming.
4M's and methodology.
We ain't done yet.
4M's
AMO winter break is going to be fabulous. Fabulous.
It kind of flows.
AMO winter break.
Stay with me. Our moisture, materials, mold, and methodology.
We ain't done yet.
Be there. AMO winter break. Be square. It's going to be fabulous.
He had this article, and he talked about the restoration triangle. So you have the carrier, right, the insured, and then the contractor.
Right.
And a lot of these disputes occur when you don't clarify the roles and responsibilities of each party, right?
Right.
You get down the road, and so I think there's plenty of us contractors where you get that insured that is an opportunist, and we don't nip that in the bud like right off the bat and say we're not going to be party to fraud.
Mm-hmm.
What you're talking about is, you know, we get that well, you know, the carpet over here, right? You know, or surely you can get this wall, or you know, or we can upgrade those cabinets. And it's, you know, if you're, as a contractor, if you're not saying no, that's not what we do, you know, hire somebody else, you know. But on the other side too, where we come across is a lot of insureds, and obviously there's some responsibility there as far as knowing what's in your policy. You know, if you bought the cheapest insurance policy there was available, that is going to come back to haunt you at some point.
Right.
And
I tell people that.
Yeah.
I said, you bought this insurance.
Yeah.
That's on you.
Yeah. Well, and two, I think that's for insurance agents. We talk to insurance agents every now and again. If you're not providing that level of service to your client, why would they not go with a Geico or something where they can just buy their insurance online? I know you, as an avid listener, all 12 of you of the Diojo podcast, are recalling a prior conversation we had on this topic of agent responsibility as it relates to insurance claims with a subject matter expert, author Bill Wilson, the book When Worlds Collide, and that was co-hosted with our good friend David Princeton. Let's peer back into the past, refresh the memory of our new listeners on that great discussion. An insurance agent, their role and responsibility in the claims process and understanding what they've sold to their client.
Well, I guess from a purely legal standpoint, an agent has really no obligation to advocate for a customer, and in fact, they probably, if we're being honest, will heighten their professional liability exposure by doing so. Because if there's a lack of coverage, one of the possible reasons is that the agent made a mistake. So, the good agents do advocate for their customers because the adjuster isn't always right. Again, they usually are, but those types of claims are not what this book is about. The book is about claims where it's not exactly clear whether there's coverage or not. You could argue it either way, and the book is about how do you present your interpretation of the policy language in a way that convinces the other side. And we all know that if you can demonstrate any kind of a reasonable ambiguity in the language, then the policyholder almost always wins, because insurance is largely a contract of adhesion.
Let me jump to the defense of, so I've been through all those words.
Yeah.
And the problem with insurance is it's a price-driven commodity.
Sure.
Meaning it's kind of a race to the bottom. Nobody brags about how much they paid for their insurance. Where the agents say, look, this is, you know, we deserve these commissions because we're servicing our people.
Yeah.
The carrier says, well, we need to cut commissions because we're in a price war with our competitors. The agent said, no, that's it. We can't function at any lower commission. That's kind of like, think of it being a contractor.
Yeah.
And so what happened was the company went directly to their customers and said, if you'll just reinsure directly with us, you'll have the same insurance, we'll give you a 20% discount.
Yeah.
The carriers are disingenuous because they say, well, I want a cheaper rate. They say, great, no problem, we'll cut your coverage.
Yeah.
But they don't think of that.
We want to frame, this is not a discussion to say this is a gotcha or whatever.
Yeah. Appraisal is, John, is for
the
determining
value,
loss, damage, and valuation.
Yeah.
The loss, the damage evaluation. Notice there are 3 separate issues there: loss, damage, and valuation. You don't determine coverage, but here's the issue, because insurance companies will try to pull this, where they say, well, we're not going to appraise this because it's not covered. Well, see, that's the you say, well, we don't agree that it's not covered.
Okay.
So we're going to appraise the loss, damage, and valuation of this claim. So in court, you can fight over, if it gets to that, over the coverage. But what a lot of times the insurance company appraisers try to do is, that I say, well, you're litigating coverage, and that's not our forum. And they said, well, yes, but I don't want to value something that's not covered. I said, well, we don't agree that it's not covered. So we're going to value it. The other thing is, some of the carriers say, well, we can't argue over scope. And I know your guys know what scope is. Scope is what needs to be done. How much work needs to be done, the repairs that need to be done. And I said, well, that's part of loss, damage, and valuation. I mean, scope is definitely a part of it.
That part is not a game. I mean, each side may be trying to win. The customer is stuck in the middle, and they're just relying on both sides to do their due diligence. And so I think the frustrating part for contractors that are honest is they did do their due diligence. And so it's frustrating for them to have to go through this process, spend this much more time. And in the end, it's a lot more overhead, and they're not getting paid for that. In fact, they're probably going to end up with a contract that is less than what they originally wrote, doing their due diligence.
Well, that's part of loss, damage, and valuation. I mean, scope is definitely a part of it.
On that particular note, I had an adjuster one time call me and say, they said, I'm calling you in regards to this claim, and it was a small, or I think it was like 7 or 8. So the adjuster calls and says, I'm calling you on behalf of the insured. They've authorized me to deal with you and discuss this. I can settle this for $5,000. And I said, based on what? You know, like, can you send over your comparative estimate and show us what you feel is not correct? And he goes, no, it's just $5,000. And I said, in my understanding, I'm not supposed to negotiate price. That's illegal for me to do. As the contractor, I'm not an adjuster. So I will talk scope with you all day long. If you feel we haven't supported a scope, or there's not enough pictures, or you don't understand why we approached it that way, I'll talk that. But I'm not going to just arbitrarily. I said, please send me your estimate. So he says, I'm not authorized to send you the estimate. And I said, so you're authorized to negotiate the scope with me per the client, but you're not authorized per the client to send me your comparative estimate. Yeah, I'll have to call them. So is that correct? I mean, as a contractor, when we start talking just numbers, we're now not defending our area of expertise, which is, this is what we assess the damages to be and how we're going to approach it.
Right. Well, and it is. You're not under licensing agreements. You're not supposed to be able to. The challenge for contractors is, and also for policyholders. See, when you're dealing with a
because they're in that scenario, they're wondering what the heck is going on, right? And
one of the things I have, which everybody that's worked with me here is, I always tell the policyholder, you know, if your insurance company and your contractor are in a pissing match, you're the only one that's getting wet.
Buddy the Elf, what's your favorite color? Put that down.
Hello? Hello?
We are now on the phone with David Princeton, Advocate Claim Service. Hello?
There's a reasonable or good faith basis. There's a good faith basis to dispute the cost of what is being alleged, then it's not bad faith. So like that's a different line or different threshold, but that's one of the consequences of the appraisal clause. By invoking it blindly. So there's a lot of different ways that different jurisdictions try to address the inequality that's inherent to suing a multi-billion-dollar corporation. If you have exhausted all avenues of dialogue, then appraisal makes good sense. Meaning both sides are refusing to listen to the other one about anything they say. And they're just completely far apart and the worlds won't meet. It's supposed to be a blind process. It's supposed to be an ethical process. It's not necessarily any of those things. The system can be ruined. The system can be ruined. The system can be ruined. And Roger might be a better one to give you examples of the horrors that he's seen in his years, but there's literally examples that exist where the umpire has said, hey, I need to talk to the insurance carrier's management about my opinion so that they can increase their reserve before I render it. And you see that a lot in especially like Florida, like where, you know, insurance carriers are basically fighting public adjusters legislatively in the courts and everywhere in between.
If your insurance company and your contractor are in a pissing match, you're the only one that's getting whacked.
Yeah.
The big issue that I have is that this is what we call a first party claim. This is your insurance company. I'm talking about the policyholder now.
Policyholder and carrier,
Yeah.
first policy relation or first person relationship
This is not supposed to be an adversarial relationship
between them.
Between them. So therefore, that means that the policyholder is entitled to all information. In other words, the carrier can't go, you know, I'm not going to show you our investigation or our whatever. We're just not going to do that. Well, they're entitled to that. The other thing is, and I brought this out, is that the WAC says that the insurance company is supposed to complete their investigation within 30 days of the claim.
Yeah.
Now, on major losses, that's not going to happen. But you know, you need to update the policyholder on that. But what that means is there are two laws that are pretty essential here. One is called Coventry. It's Coventry versus American States. And what that means is that the insurance company is required to investigate the cause of the loss. They can't just say, yeah, no, that's not covered. So that means hiring an engineer. That means doing sometimes selective demolition to get to, we need to look at the problem. And they have to pay for that.
Yeah.
Policyholder doesn't have to pay for that. That is...
Even prior to determining coverage.
Right. It is in determining coverage. They agree, oh yes, that's damage. And you say, well, yes, but we're going to have to take out something else to get to it.
Yep.
They say, no, you don't.
Yeah.
And they go, well, then tell me how we're going to do it.
Yeah.
And I just finished an appraisal where that came up.
Yeah.
Where one contractor said, well, we're going to have to tear out the chimney to get to the framing. Because we can't, you know, there was an engineer that said this is what you need to do to put the exterior framing back to you know code up to law and ordinance.
Yeah.
And so we called the engineer and said, well, this contractor says you need to tear out the chimney. You know, the TPA says you don't have to. And the engineer says, we just said what needs to be done. It's not our job to tell you how to do it.
Yeah.
We're not going to tell you how to do it. That's up to the contractor.
Yeah.
So then we turned back to the company and said, well, then you go ahead and you reframe the wall.
Yeah.
And, you know, well, we don't have to do that. That's the contractor. But no, you don't have to do it. And so...
So it's this weird state.
And let me explain the Coventry case, because I know all the players in it. I know all the attorneys, all the adjusters, everybody.
Yeah.
And it was a landslide claim. And landslides, earth movement is not covered under the policy. I mean, we all know the earth movement is not covered under the policy.
Yeah.
So the adjuster, and I'm not going to name him because it's a podcast, the insured went out and hired a geotech just to make sure.
Yeah.
And the geotech, this is the funny part of this ruling, said it's earth movement. So therefore, you know, the insurance company made the right call.
Yeah.
But what the court found was, well, the insurance adjuster is not a geotech.
Yeah.
He doesn't have any business determining what the cause of that damage was. Therefore, they had to pay for the investigation into the damage.
Huh.
And so a lot of times what happens is you get preemptive if not covered.
Yeah.
And in fact, a lot of times it doesn't even get to the claim people. People call their agents and the agent says, oh, don't turn in that claim, that's not covered.
Mm.
And I've had any number of cases I've gotten involved in where we look at it and go, no, that's covered. You know, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about, or that woman doesn't know. I don't want to be gender specific.
Sure.
No is an absolute. And,
Yeah.
and you'd be shocked by how many people go, oh, okay, I thought it would be covered, but they said
If
it's
you're
not
saying
covered.
so,
Oh,
yeah,
well, okay, I guess it's not
Yeah.
covered. and nobody even bothered to look. They just and the other thing is,
So even if it's not covered, the insurance company has an obligation per the policy to properly investigate. Obviously,
properly. I mean,
there's
they
a lot
can,
of gray area.
you know, there
there,
can be
but-
a lot of things that can happen, and they go,
Yeah.
yeah, no, that's so obvious it's not even
Yeah.
funny. You know, but if they, and again, the key word is proper investigation. They can't just pull it out of their nether regions and
Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
well, that's not covered. And in fact, contractors can act as appraisers.
Well, basically, your estimate can serve as.
Well, so here's the thing is that the key word in appraisal is the appraiser needs to be disinterested.
Okay.
Not uninterested, disinterested. So disinterested is a little different. And what that means is I don't have a financial benefit from the outcome.
Hate to do this, but I'm going to call in another expert. Sean Scott has experience as a restoration contractor, as an appraiser, and as an umpire. Let's get him on the phone. Doop, boop, 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 doop, boop. How do you get involved as appraisal and umpiring, or what drew you to that?
Well, so in California, anyway, you know, the qualifications that, you know, allows you to be qualified to be an umpire is just simply if you are disinterested, there's no bias, like you don't have any interest in the outcome, so you can't be an umpire on a percentage of the claim. It's an hourly rate. And the other thing is that you're just qualified, which is very kind of gray, vague. A lot of times umpires end up being jams, judges, retired judges, or you know, lawyers, or people that are not even in our industry, which is actually works against the process because they're not familiar with Xactimate, pricing, construction. So as a contractor, you know, I can go in objectively when both appraisers can't agree. The umpire gets engaged to decide on the disputed items. So if you're not, you know, in the industry, how would you even know how to value the disputed items, say for flooring or framing or concrete? You'd be lost. So a lot of these umpires who are non-restoration people, they split the baby, and then really that's not the way that the process is designed. It's supposed to be the umpire acts as a third appraiser in some cases.
There are common things you see where maybe contractors kind of shoot themselves in the foot.
Yes. So, I mean, that's sort of a loaded question. So it depends on how the demand for appraisal is submitted. So if nobody has done an estimate or a proper estimate, and the contractor who's acting as the appraiser for the insured, as an example, and you have to, you know, do your own estimate, you can be tremendously effective because a lot of these estimates that end up in appraisal are sheets written by an adjuster who's maybe had no hands-on experience, and their sheets might be 500% low of what it really should be.
Yeah.
So here's where a contractor could really make the insured whole, provided that they get every detach and reset and doorknob and light, you know, fixture, you know, using all those line items that we have in Xactimate to, you know, maximize the estimate legitimately, right?
Legit maximize. Yep.
Yeah. So if you've got a really good handle on Xactimate and all those different line items, you can really, really provide a tremendous value to a homeowner who's, you know, fighting an insurance company on a lowball scope.
Yeah. Nobody wants to go to appraisal, John. The insurance company has an amazing tolerance for your pain. The key word is proper investigation. They can't just pull it out of their nether regions and say, well, that's not covered. There's an insurance joke about how the policyholder has a loss, and they call their agent and say, hey, I had a loss, I want to know if I'm covered. And the agent says, well, tell me what happened, I'll tell you if you're covered or not. And the policyholder says, oh, no. You tell me what covered, and I'll tell you what happened.
Because you've got a good podcast with a pretty robust following.
Obviously, Roger Housen is a great resource in the Pacific Northwest specifically, but he, as he discusses, he's done claims throughout and advised. But this is something you can request from their website, icdrinc.com, but it is an two-page overview of the appraisal process and the unfair claim settlement practices, as well as segments of the Insurance Fair Conduct Act, which he mentions, IFCA, which is Washington specific. But I also found online, just a quick search, the Unfair Claims Settlement Practices Act. Looks like this is from 1997, so there may be an updated version. That's part of the NAIC model for Unfair Trade Practices Act, which includes purpose, definitions, unfair claims settlement practices prohibited, unfair claims practices defined, statement of charges, cease and desist and penalty orders, penalty for violation of cease and desist orders, regulations and severability. Probably great resources for you to know as an intentional restorer, but also reference material for insureds that you might be helping that need to better understand what's in their policy and how their policy should act at the time of a claim, and then how to find resources to help them with that. Which brings also our good friend who's on this podcast, David Princeton.
In the Be Intentional Culture book hug moment.
We got the hugger in the house.
Has a column in CNR magazine, Dear David, and the latest article, How Can I Overcome a Denied Insurance Claim, where he shares a personal story. So basically there's a kitchen damage, right? And there's a hose bib that leaks and causes extensive damage in a kitchen, but a select area is revealed in that same area that has some rot. Insurance initially rejecting the claim based on the rot.
Yes, Satan? Oh, I'm sorry, sir. You sounded like someone else.
But then doing some due diligence to try to explain, hey, we have some rot, we understand there's either limited or questionable coverage here, but we believe the majority of the damage is related to this covered item, i.e. the hose bib. So it's very important, kind of put your feelers out, make sure you're getting good advice, people that have experience in the areas. This is a touch point for myself, but if you're looking for help, recently I wrote an article about fire chasing, also in CNR magazine, but a few questions when you're pursuing something or pursuing an aspect of business or even seeking counsel. I think a few universal questions that it's important to ask is, first, is what I'm considering even legal, right? That if it's not legal, we shouldn't be doing it. and have resources that can check you, right? And say, I don't know, you may have the right intention, but what you're considering isn't legal. Is it ethical? Same thing, right? Can someone tell you or check you whether maybe what you're pursuing isn't ethical? Is this the right thing for me? That's what every restorer has to decide for themselves, especially in that article we were talking about fire chasing. Then do you understand the upsides and downsides of pursuing that said strategy? Then I think this is, do you have the resources to pursue this, and or can you afford not to try it? So are you willing to allow someone else to fill that void? Again, I think that's fire damage specific or more business strategy. But then who can help me shorten my dang learning curve on this topic? And that is our motto here at the Diojo Podcast. Diojo Podcast. Diojo Podcast. We don't want to replace your learning curve, and you shouldn't seek to have somebody replace it for you. The best teacher is a school of hard knocks. And then if you seek counsel, does your chosen counsel have real experience with executing on the particular aspect of business that you're considering? And so obviously we've got Roger, who's got years and years experience with appraisal, from both sides, representing contractors, representing the insurance company, and I believe him when he says,
I call him the way I see him.
A lot of our peers in the area mention that Roger, they don't always agree with Roger, but he's fair
I call him the way I see him.
In his conclusions and those kinds of things. And like he mentions, man, if you're going to be a jerk and just dig your heels in unreasonably, then you might find you're going to get the baby split, right? Which isn't in anybody's best interest, as Sean Scott talks about.
Split the baby.
I think, especially in the realm of coaching and consulting, we are asked as restorers to be able to see a problem, put an estimate together and a bid on the scope, the cost, and the duration, right? We're asked all the time, well, how long do you think this will take? Which is an uncomfortable question, but we're asked to do it. And I think if you're hiring somebody to assist you with something, be specific about what you want help with. Have them put a scope and an estimate together, and then a fixed duration, at which time we can reevaluate whether further services are needed or not.
Don't you cry, you bastard! You are a worthless human being! If you shed a tear, you are worthless!
That's a little bit of a tangent there. Thank you for listening, but this is my podcast, so I'll say what I want.
That's just stupid.
This intersects on a lot of the things, right?
I don't care if it's stupid.
It's
that's
the law.
The law.
Yeah. Hopefully those resources are of good value to helping you elevate your knowledge so that you can better advise people both on where to look and maybe who can help them. This concludes part 1 of this at least 2-part series on appraisal with our main guest, Roger Howson. Join us next time for part 2 of this conversation, and at some point in the future we'll also release audio of the discussion we had with Roger about some of the history and major changes and shifts in insurance policies and how that affects claims. So thank you for listening. We'll see you next time. The Diojo Podcast, helping you shorten your dang learning curve. Every day is a struggle. Quit the bitch, you can give up or you can get lit.
This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
The insurance company has an amazing tolerance for your pain.
The topic today is appraisal.
It kind of segues into appraisal.
We've had some contractors reach out asking about the purpose, role, pros and cons of appraisal. So from our neck of the woods, the main character in this discussion is one Roger Howson.
His legend precedes him.
I've got the most interesting job in the world. I'm an insurance adjuster.
He is the most interesting man in the world.
I call him the way I see him.
Drum roll. Let's get into the hot topic. We've got some input from Ben Justison.
It is time consuming.
What's up, homies? Input from our good friend David Princeton.
You know, the system can be ruined.
We've got our friend Bill Wilson.
Get your own copy of When Words Collide by Bill Wilson.
We've got Andy McCabe.
Performing the functions of a public adjuster without a license.
And Sean Scott.
Because you've got a good podcast with a pretty robust following.
And the reason you agree on an umpire early on is because once you're at crosshairs, you're not going to agree on an umpire either. So you should agree on an umpire before you disagree on anything else.
You may just enjoy seeing the train wreck happen for yourself.
Not a problem. I've been doing this a long time, so I'm in all kinds of uncomfortable.
Oh, getting some reading in, Ed?
The place was a piece of crap, but you guys insured it. Don't assume that the adjuster you're dealing with knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
I would say this, right? If you are contemplating invoking an appraisal clause, like I think this is a good general piece of advice. If you're contemplating invoking appraisal, don't do it blindly. And don't rush into it.
Stay in your lane, bro.
The Diojo Podcast.